Okay, so the first thing I want to do, even though I know you and know you very well, I want you to take a minute and tell me who you are and what you do.
Yeah, okay. Jessica Joy Sparzak, and I run a flower company. I've been doing that here in Denver for 4 years. The concept is about 5 years old. But yeah, I run a flower company and we ship nationwide, and I do big, large-scale floral installations all over the city, and I do dried floral art, and yeah.
And you do that in residences as well.
I do residential, commercial, yeah.
All kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to jump ahead because I think this is important and I'm excited to talk about it. When I first met you, actually was at an event where you were there working.
Yep.
And I went there as a photographer to network and to meet as many people and to meet the owners of the space.
Yep.
And you were one of the first people that I talked to. I want you to kind of recall that memory.
Yeah, sure. So that was an exciting event for me too, because it was the first time I was asked to do something kind of large scale.
Really
and I did a
large scale.
hanging installation. I'd never done one before.
Yeah.
I just went for it and did it and finished it in my heels. So that's where I was at. Yeah, I just kind of came back in and tweaked some things, and they got some pictures of me because I was wearing heels up on a ladder finishing the install.
Perfect.
But yeah, so that was an exciting event for me too, because it was sort of my debut as a floral artist in Denver. And I remember meeting so many people, I was networking, and then...
And you were kind of just, if I'm right, like you said, starting out here.
I had just started.
And how long ago was that?
So that was exactly. 2019.
Yeah.
2019, so it was either June or July. I think it was June.
Yeah, I think you're right.
2019.
Yeah.
And I don't remember how we bumped into each other. I think we were
I
in line.
approached you, actually.
Oh, it was? Did you? Okay.
My aggressive affection. I approached you, yeah, and introduced myself. I saw the piece that you had made and was just blown away.
Okay, so that's what it was.
Yeah.
And then we started chatting, and somehow it came up that you had a baby. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, oh, she's a 6-month-old and she's here.
Yeah.
First of all, that's impressive. And second of all, this girl is like in it right now.
Yeah, and you said those words to me. Yeah. I love this memory, and I wanted you to tell it. I remember it that same way, but for me, and right off the bat, I'm emotional about it. I have always loved networking events, right? They're so fun. You get to open up, you get to meet people. Mm-hmm. People that are in the arts, and Denver's such an incredible space, and there's so many artists here. But I remember being really attracted to your work right away. You had done this beautiful hanging piece, but also your energy was really warm and welcoming. You were someone that I felt like I could approach. So just right off the bat, that's really special. Especially at an event like that where so much is going on and you're a central part of it. And I remember you asking me, how old is your baby? And I said 6 months, and you went, whoa, you're in it. And I think those words and that understanding of what I was experiencing, because I felt very isolated. I think that's a very normal thing with a 6-month-old. Yep. I also had, let's see, a 3-year-old. My oldest was 3 at the time. So things were very loud and busy in my house. And being there was me stepping out, right? And feeling kind of nervous to walk into this event all alone. And to have you see me in that moment was... it shook me in a way that I really needed, and ever since, I think, I'll use the word again, instrumental. You've been instrumental in giving me a voice to say some of the hard things, some of the soggy, tear-filled things, and just feel seen through it. And that kind of pushed me not only to then make art with you moving forward, which we'll touch on in a little bit, but really just ask other people and know that I'm safe to call out, oh my gosh, you're in it. Like it didn't feel bad to have you say that to me. It gave me permission to let go of that tension and let go of that fear and be seen by somebody, which is what we're trying to do here with Afterbirth. And so now moving forward, it's been 4.5 years. I guess actually 4. You have grown in your business. I have grown as a photographer, and as we've gone through those last few years, I can say from my perspective, we've created some pretty incredible art.
We've
published some amazing photos and some magazines. But the really most amazing part of it is the friendship that I feel like we've been able to create.
It was an instant bond.
Yeah.
There was something so deep in that moment. And I remember feeling like everything else was sort of standing still. There was a lot of noise, there was a lot of people, there was a lot of laughter.
Yeah.
But in that moment, there was this connection on such a deep level as two moms having small children. I was out of that stage, but I remembered it acutely.
I could see it.
And I just remembered thinking, wow, she is pursuing this. She's still going, she's here, she's present, but she's got, this is a lot. This is really a hard stage.
Yeah.
And it just was an instant bond. And it felt like on a very soul level, you and I connected immediately.
And I needed that connection.
And so did I. So did I.
That's so good to hear that you also need it. I think I know that after all the time that we've spent together, but it's so nice to hear.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the biggest messages of what we're trying to convey to women going through the postpartum period, right? There's a big question mark around how long that lasts. So for you, I want to kind of dive into your experience.
Yeah.
You have 2 children. Tell me about them.
Oh my gosh, my kids. So now they are 12 and 10. So Eleanor, she is 12. Helm, his full name is Wilhelm. He's 10, and I absolutely love this stage with them. This is such a fun age. We really connect.
Yeah.
It feels like their babyhood was forever ago, and then in another moment it feels like it was just the other day.
Absolutely.
So some parts of it are kind of fuzzy to me and like vague because we've been through a decade, but other parts of it are so fresh in my mind, and I can just remember everything about how they smelled and their little coos and all that stuff.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
I know exactly what you mean. I feel the same way. On that note, I will say, and this is just a question that I feel like is relevant for those of us that know without a shadow of a doubt that when they were really little, we were in that very tumultuous, dark stage, whether for me it was depression and anxiety. It's undiagnosed, but I think OCD was a little bit of a factor for me as well, which there's very little research about that. So we're still kind of learning. For you, I know, and I want you to explain it, but do you feel like during the phases of the depression, there were moments that you missed? There were foggy moments that you weren't really present for because of what you were going through emotionally?
That's a great question. And with Helm, yes, for sure. With Ellie, not so much, but those were 2 very different experiences. But I definitely had postpartum depression with both children.
Okay, and how were they different?
So with Helm, he's the younger one. I'm trying to decide, should I tell her first or should I tell him first? Which one, But
well, she came first.
She came first.
But they were so different.
They were so different, and I would say Helm was the more traumatic one. So I think I'm going to start there because it's the one that's more obvious.
Yeah.
So that's why I think his story is important to tell first.
I agree.
Helm was early. He came 3 weeks early, and I had planned with Ellie, I had a home birth, beautiful experience. With Helm, I had planned another home birth, but because I had a fever during labor, we went to the hospital.
Okay.
It's a very long story, but the short version of it is, had a very challenging labor with him. It was like giving birth with the flu. I had a fever, I had chills, I was trying to get the baby out, I just was very uncomfortable in the hospital because I had a baby at home, so I knew those comforts, candles and flowers and things. Did not have that.
Yeah.
And, but I was so grateful to be at the hospital because we were both sick. He came, he ended up in the NICU. Later on, we went home. We went back to the hospital because I spiked a fever of 104. I was very ill.
Yeah.
Turns out that I had 2 severe infections in my blood. So I was on the edge of death, really. And then in the midst of that, realized that I had 2 pulmonary embolisms.
Now, during labor.
So this was
prior.
post. So right after I had him, we went back to the hospital. We went home. We went home from the hospital with the baby. The day I went home, I spiked this fever, ended up in the emergency room, very ill.
Yeah.
It took a full week to figure out everything that was wrong.
Okay.
So I was in the hospital for a week. When they found the severe infections in the blood, that was the first like freak out.
Yeah.
And then the second freak out was I couldn't breathe. And I kept saying I couldn't breathe. And I kept having a lot of trouble, severe pain. I couldn't figure out what was going wrong. The nurses were kind of not really paying attention to me. And I remember talking to my midwife and she said, there is something very wrong and you need to tell them to pay attention. You have to talk to them. And this nurse came in the middle of the night. It wasn't supposed to be her shift. It was one of those miracle situations. And I could see the fear in her eyes. And she was like, we need to deal with this right now. And all these things happened. I got tested. It was like she knew it in her gut. But I remember laying in the hospital with Helm in the baby bassinet and Ryan, my husband, on the plastic chair thing. And I remembered starting to cry and thinking, I don't know if I should wake them up to say goodbye or if I should just go. Because it was, that's what was happening. And that's before we realized it was pulmonary embolisms. But my body knew and my brain, my heart knew I was dying. And so when they were able to attend to me and we figured everything out and it all started to shift, you know, that I came out of that time. We went home from the hospital, and then I started to develop more pain. And within, I think it took about 3 months, which is an insane amount of time. It took about 3 months to realize that I had dislocated ribs while I was delivering Helm.
Oh my goodness.
And then after that, I had received some care that wasn't the best care, and so there was an adjustment done on me, and it knocked out 4 more. So by the time we got through to figuring out what was wrong, I had dislocated ribs from the sternum and the spine, which is highly unusual. It's just not a normal.
Really unusual.
I mean, I always say, I took care of it for women for all of time. So no one will ever go through this because I did it.
Which is amazing, the advocacy part of it, like you advocating for yourself and knowing it's really difficult in those situations when you know you're not getting the care you need. To advocate for yourself while you're also in pain. You're also trying just to survive and breathe and be functional, and you have a brand new baby that you're also
trying to care for,
worrying about. Are they going to be okay? Is my husband okay? You know, those things feel insurmountable in the moment.
They did, and to add insult to injury, actually, like the real, every doctor that I went to said, you're having pain because you're experiencing anxiety and you have depression and anxiety. And I kept saying, that's true.
That's not wrong.
100%.
Right.
I do, and I believe you on that.
Right.
I can't even deal with that right now because I am in so much pain that I need physical help. Finally, once I got that physical help, the depression was, of course, still there. But it was a mess.
I agree. The mess being that something is happening, right? We, as humans, we know and we trust our instinct, but how do you advocate beyond someone telling you you're just anxious or you're just sad
you're not hearing me. I remember feeling utterly alone. Like deeply alone because no one would listen to me, and I had to keep pushing forward and saying, we are not to the bottom of this yet.
There's more.
But it compounded the level of depression that I felt. I mean, I was very, very low. And it was a very dark time. And that whole recovery was long and dark.
How long would you say, not only, I mean, there's the recovery, so there's that timeline, and then there's the timeline of the depression. Would you say they coincided perfectly? There was probably a lot of adjustment. How long would you say that lasted?
Which piece of it, both?
Both.
So the recovery, the intensive recovery was about 2 to 3 years for my body.
My goodness.
So my body was a wreck. I was atrophied. I was 98 pounds there was just, and it's, without explaining the whole thing, it's just such a long story of why was my body like that. But I basically couldn't move. If I sneezed, my ribs would dislocate. If I picked up my purse, my ribs would dislocate.
Forget holding your baby.
Forget holding my baby. My mom moved in with us. She was my caregiver. She was my children's caregiver. Ryan started a new job. He was out of town all the time. It was so difficult. The depression side of it, I remember talking with my midwife, and Helm was this was a significant time. Helm was 10 months old.
Okay.
And we could not get my ribs to stabilize, and the connection was made between relaxin. So your body continues to produce relaxin while you're nursing. And I was a passionate nursing mother. Like, I really loved to nurse my babies. And there came a point where my mom, Ryan, and the midwife all sort of had an intervention with me, and they said, really think you need to stop nursing. And I was crushed.
Right.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
the one thing you can control, right?
I was like, but my mom brings me the baby, and I hold the baby, and I nurse the baby, and then she takes the baby back and does everything else for me because I
This is
can't
my
lift him.
connection.
Like, this was the most important thing to me with Helm.
Yeah.
And I was crushed. But they made such a valid point. Like, maybe if you stop, your body will stop producing the relaxin, and relaxin loosens what? Your ligaments. Ligaments hold your ribs in place.
Right.
So they said we need to make this decision, and we're asking you. They directly asked me, for the sake of the whole family and my body, to stop. And so I did, and I'll never forget the last time I nursed him, and my mom took pictures of it, and I look at them. I go back and I look at them and I cry, because I felt so connected to Helm. We had both been through trauma. He had helped me through my trauma, and I felt so much joy. And you know how when you're nursing, if you're fortunate enough to nurse, it produces all these beautiful hormones.
Happy hormones.
Happy hormones that bring you joy.
Yep.
And I knew that I was having to let go of that. So at that time, they also said, hey, Jess, you're super depressed.
Yeah.
And we don't know that you can get through all that on your own. You know, so we went through I went on to an antidepressant at that time.
Okay.
For about 6 months, and it helped a ton.
That's so good to hear.
It really helped so much.
A lot of moms need to hear that it's okay.
It's
that
okay.
the medication is an important step to get you from one level to another. It's not forever. I really appreciate you bringing that up because there's a lot
vital.
of moms. Yeah. I was very, very scared to go on medication.
So was I.
And so much so that there was this societal aspect of it wasn't that I didn't want to, it was this story I was telling myself, right? So I really think that's an important thing for women to hear and to know that it doesn't have to be forever, or it can be something that you continue if it is a tool to help you get through that just, again, difficult, dark, heavy stage. And also I want to point out, letting go of nursing when it was one of the only things, the only thing that you could control, that you could...
It was something I was contributing to the family.
I
couldn't
can
do
do
it. I couldn't cook. I mean, I could cook, but it just meaning like I couldn't care for my household. I couldn't care for my family. My husband was out of town. I felt like a shell of myself.
Yeah.
And I felt very frail, and that's not my personality. I am a go-getter. I
this
do it
girl.
myself. Something needs to be fixed. I do it myself. Like I was reduced to what I felt was nothing.
Right.
And when that was going to be taken away, it was almost too much for me.
Yeah.
But I thought, okay, what if they're right? What if this is the
necessary.
thing that allows me to start to heal? And they were right.
They were right.
It was the thing that set me on the path to healing. But there was just a long mental, emotional, and physical road ahead, and it took a full span of 7 years. So, but the acute stages were for years 1 through 4.
I will draw this parallel too for you because we have been so connected since Cleo was born. My oldest is now 7. We're making this thing now because it's taken me this many years to feel strong enough to talk about it, strong enough to be honest about how difficult it was, how much I needed my community, and I didn't really know what I needed, right? When you're in it, you're not really sure what you need, but you know you need people to stop telling you what you need.
Oh,
you know?
Yeah, don't tell me what I need.
That was so true for me. You and I are both go-getter type people. I think, honestly, every woman I know is. We all have this drive to contribute and to nurture and to care for the spaces around us and the people around us. So to be what feels like minimized, to be minimized
is such a good word.
Yeah. It's not what makes us feel strong. And I think in these moments of postpartum, whether you have depression and anxiety or you're just in the postpartum phase,
Yep.
there's an aspect of taking away what feels normal, what you're used to. So earlier when we were talking, and I really want to touch on this,
Yes.
we talked about expectations, the way we pictured things being versus the way they actually were. And I think that's a big thing that moms, new moms in particular, have this vision of what things are going to look like.
Yes.
And not to take away that vision, it's important for us to visualize and dream and have goals, but it almost never looks the way you think it's going to. Not negative, it's not bad, but how did that feel? Like, describe that to me, because I know that was big for me.
Yeah, so that's where Ellie's story comes in, you know, because she was my first baby.
Right.
So with Ellie, we had started trying to have a baby, and 2.5 years in, had a miscarriage. And then continued to try, and we ended up having to get tested and all this stuff because our numbers were not great. Like just having a baby wasn't, they were like, we're not actually, you know, the first one that was a miscarriage is kind of a miracle. If you get pregnant again, it's going to be a miracle. And so we were on the path to thinking through adoption, in vitro, all of that, when I got pregnant with her.
Yeah.
And so we'd been married for 10 years when we had her. And of course, like, I mean, I just was exactly what you're describing. I had all these ideas. We were living in New York City at the time. I'm like, we had a great job, but I wasn't sure if I was going to go back. And then had a midwife, had this baby at home in the water. The birth tub took up the majority of the apartment.
Totally.
People were worried.
I
remember like 2 weeks before I had her, somebody asked me, well, aren't you worried that the tub will be too heavy and you might crash through the floor? And I'm like,
I hadn't even
thought of that. Did I really need to think about that? Thank you so much. And so, but her birth was super magical. When I went into labor, early labor, like when we kind of knew the goal was Ryan would run down to the flower market, buy peonies and ranunculus, and we would have peonies for her birth. I mean, and we had candles going, and I was like sipping on honey stuff, and like, it was just, I had a doula, and giving birth to her, it was a very long labor.
How long do you remember?
It was, I remember that the active labor was 12 hours. So 12 hours of active labor is a long time.
And you pre-labor, I mean, not you, we, especially
I had
first
been
child.
in early labor for a while because he had enough time to go get the flowers. I remember that. And he came back with them. Always good. But I had 12 solid hours of active labor with my midwife there. And finally, I mean, I had trouble pushing anyways. She comes into the world, right? Ellie comes out in the water, and here she is. And I, you know, there's so much going on in that moment. Of course, it was absolutely magical and beautiful. I remember the full week after, and this is the part that I have never talked publicly about. I have only shared this with my sister and I think my husband. And the reason for that is because I never wanted Ellie to hear me say that it was hard. And I love her with all my heart. I love my kids so much. But I've never shared how disconnected I felt. It was shameful.
It's not.
I remember I did talk to one, I do remember now, I remember I was laying on my bed with her in our New York City apartment with this beautiful window next to my bed, and I would just lay there with her, and I remember looking at her and thinking, what's missing? Why don't
I felt that too.
Why am I not like, I love you, and I feel connected to you, and you're my baby.
Yeah.
But why is there this weirdness? Like,
why does this feel so strange,
so strange,
different than I imagined it would?
I thought that I was just gonna have the warm fuzzies all the time.
Yeah.
And I remember, and I talked to my friend Megan on the phone, and she was like, Jess, that's actually not weird.
That's not weird
That's
at all.
not weird. She didn't call it postpartum depression. I don't think she just, yes, thank you, we have tissue, don't we? I should do that. I remember I felt an enormous amount of shame. And like, did this mean I wasn't cut out to be a mother?
That's exactly the thought I had.
And I was scared.
Yeah.
Because that scared me. I thought, but wait a
Can't
minute.
unring that bell.
You know? Yeah, like I've been working towards this for 5 years. What if I
Did I make a mistake?
did I make a mistake? Am I a bad person? Like, what is this going on? And Ryan felt nothing of that.
Sure.
So he felt completely connected with her. And I remember he would sense what she needed faster than I did, and that made me feel really guilty. Like he would say, I think maybe she's hot. And he would take, layers off of her and she'd be fine. And I'm like,
why did I not think of that?
he's like, well, maybe she needs this or that, or let's open the window, or maybe this is scratchy. I don't know. He just had so much immediate intuition with her, and I felt jealous.
Sure.
And I felt like this isn't fair, and what's wrong with me?
Sure.
And Ellie was a high needs baby, so she was very intense. She's still intense, but in a really good way. But like she's an amazing person. And now that she's older, I'm like, oh, you were doing that when you were a baby, and now I get it.
Isn't that so
now we're
funny?
talking about it,
I have
and you're
that
like,
with Cray.
I really wish I could have understood that then. There were times when she was just angry. She was spitfire angry, and that's just who she was, even as a baby. And I took that as, I'm not doing this right.
100%, that is how I felt with Cray. And he was my first as well.
Yeah.
And I will say, I imagine Helm gave you this too, that having Cleo helped me put those pieces together of, oh my goodness, so much of our baby's personality is there.
It's there.
The minute they come out. They are who they are.
They
Now,
are.
I will nurture the bananas out of those babies, and I
Yep.
will teach them and love them and guide them.
Yep.
But they are who they are.
They are.
And there is nothing I remember saying, I'm imprinting. What am I imprinting on him? That he is so unhappy. He cried and cried and cried. He would not sleep. That child still does not sleep great.
Yep.
And would take half-hour naps at the most. And I felt like I'm giving him my anxiety. My anxiety, I'm somehow pouring that into him, and he can't relax because of me.
Yep. I used to have that fear.
And what you're describing, and on one level, I'm glad you said, it's shameful, not because it is, but because that is how you feel so deeply. Yep. And once you're in that mind frame, and I'm not sure, did you share that with Ryan? Were you telling him that you were feeling that way at the time? I know I held back quite a bit.
Yeah, I can't remember if I immediately did. I don't think I did. I think I told my friend Megan because she felt really safe to me, and she was one of the few women that I was close to that had already had a baby. She was ahead of me.
Yeah.
And I talked with my sister a lot about it.
Was your sister a mom at that point?
Yes, so my sister was much further ahead of me, and she was very supportive. I didn't talk to Ryan about it right away, I don't think. I actually can't remember.
I know, isn't it funny? So there are things, when I look back at pictures of Cray's infancy and even to the first year, which I think it's important to point out to moms how long the postpartum phase, depression and anxiety can last. I think there's this concept, and I really want to jump on it, and we're covering so much of what I think is important.
Yeah.
Postpartum, there's this misconception that the only way to experience postpartum is it's very hard to say out loud, the desire to harm your child.
Right.
That is not indicative of what I experienced personally. However, I think that a lot of the women I'm talking to that are afraid to open up are afraid because they had depression, they had anxiety, they did not have ideation to harm their child.
Me either.
But so they think if I admit that I had this, then I'm admitting that I wanted to harm my baby, and that's not necessarily accurate.
Interesting.
Now, women that did have those ideation, I don't want them to be afraid, because that isn't a choice we're making, right?
No.
You're not choosing to go through this hormonal change, this chemical change that then throws you into upset, right? Just overall upset in your lifestyle, in your ability to function.
Yep.
For me, in my ability to go be social in the world, I really couldn't be around other people, which is not like me at all. I love being around people. I love talking to people, obviously.
Yeah.
So when I found myself scared to leave my house because I had ideation, not that I wanted to harm my child, but that something horrible would happen if we were to leave. I was concerned and almost convinced that if I left with Cray, that he would die. And even saying that out loud now, I hear how kind of just illogical, unreasonable it sounds, but that's part of it, right? You are a little bit unreasonable and illogical and afraid of that. I remember I've had a lot of women say to me, and I definitely said it when I was going through it, I just feel crazy. And I feel like if I say how I'm feeling, I'm just gonna be labeled as crazy.
Yeah.
And then they'll take him. And that,
oh my gosh, that's terrifying.
That's the fear, right? Is women don't wanna be honest about even just the disconnect that happens so often. I was with you on, the first couple of months of Cray's life. Of course I loved this baby.
Yeah.
I wanted him so badly. And in the same vein as you, we tried to have children for quite a long time before we were able to have Cray. I actually had an ectopic pregnancy that I hadn't shared yet in the film, and we'll kind of dig into, but our road to having kids was long and hard. And
so you're already emotional.
Right.
You're already, it feels very vulnerable.
Right. Oh, and as vulnerable as it gets, right?
And those first 6 months to a year of after you've had your child, you know nothing. You don't know anything. You don't know what you're doing. There's so much room for judgment on yourself, other people judging you, depending on the community that you're around. I
Family
had supportive people and judgy people.
Sure.
And you're already, as a woman, judging yourself, being hard on yourself, and so going through all these other feelings and emotions that are completely out of your control.
Right.
What happens chemically in your body during that stage is unlike anything else you've ever gone through.
Or will ever, unless you have another child, right? And so I do want to touch on, you talked about, you were experiencing symptoms of depression with your first child. Obviously, the traumatic nature of your birth with Helm contributed to even more depression. And I think it's important, and we're doing the research now, there's more conversation around the fact that traumatic labor, which all labor is somewhat traumatic, right?
It's a ring of fire.
Right?
There's something to be said about that.
So such warriors we are after that. And I felt so strong getting through that. But then to have that kind of what is missing, I really appreciate that you said it that way. What is missing here? What am I not doing that I'm supposed to be doing so that I have this connection that I've been sold for years and years that I'm gonna have it immediately with my baby? And to not have that felt like a failure on my part.
Absolutely.
And to hear so many women, I mean, I'm talking 90% rate of people saying, me too. I loved my kid, I felt connected to a point, but it takes time to feel comfortable in this completely new world. That, you agreed to, and you, not only that, I rushed in head first, I was ready to go. But it took some time for me to feel comfortable inside of my role as a parent, as a mother. It affected my marriage. Drew and I are so solid. I feel so connected to him. He is my best friend. But there were moments where I also felt jealous of his ability to read our babies in those moments of challenge, and I wasn't able to do that. And I'd like to point out to moms watching that we are multitasking, right? After we have a baby. We're healing physically. We're healing emotionally from whatever may or may not have transpired during labor. And we're adjusting to a new body, new hormones, just a completely new way of existing in the world. While our partners, as I know Ryan, and I know how nurturing he is, and how much he loves you, and what a caretaker he is. Drew is the same way. But it didn't matter because he wasn't healing. He was just going along like life was normal. Nothing had changed for him other than now we have this new person in our family. Now that's a big thing to have changed. So I don't want to take away, I don't want to minimize that. But it was a very different adjustment for him than it was for me.
Absolutely.
Okay, so an analogy that I can't get out of my head, and I enjoy it because I feel like for me, and you can weigh in, it really felt relevant. When I really took notice, and I didn't really acknowledge my postpartum depression and anxiety as being a real thing until I was 6 months postpartum, which is, right when we met. This was with Cray though, where the traumatic labor, the adjustment to a new child was just so brand new that it felt a lot to me like waking up in a pitch black room. I don't know where I am. I don't know if I'm in a familiar place. I know in my logical mind Because even during postpartum, right, you have that ability to defer to what is logical, what is true, what do I know, what can I hold, right? In this dark room, I thought, I know my eyes will eventually adjust and I will be able to see what's around me. But in that moment of darkness, I remember that fear, the fear, did I make a mistake? The fear, do I belong here? Am I capable of being the mom I imagined being and taking care of this child? I hate to say, am I gonna ruin his life? Was in that darkness was a thought. And I couldn't see anything around me. When I met you, it was like a hand reaching across and grabbing me. And even though my eyes hadn't adjusted yet, you were there and I wasn't by myself. And I knew that someone could see me, could guide me. That safety that you gave me in that friendship and in that relationship, and then in the art that we were able to make afterwards, I think that's the answer. I think that until we have a body of research about postpartum depression and anxiety and OCD, until women are strong enough and brave enough and led by the hand, perhaps by people like us, to open up and admit and say the thing, say the damn thing, you know.
Just say it,
they need that hand. They need that person, that friend. Like you even said, I kind of reached out to my other friends who had been through it and I knew they had an expertise. Is that indicative of your experience when you were going through it?
Yes, I think my sister was a major lifeline for me with that. That resonates with me, that thought of being in this unknown, uncomfortable place, and that picture of being in darkness. And that's a scary place to be, but having someone reach out. I think a key piece of that is that moment you and I had where there was validation and I was able to say to you, it's okay to not be okay. You're really in it right now. You are in a really difficult place. And in the midst of being, we were in this room, right? We were in this very full room with lots of noise and lots of people around. Everything for me went silent.
Me too.
I didn't hear anything else. It was just you and me. And it was this sort of like everything else stood still, and we were in this time and space together as women, as mothers, as artists, having this point of connection. And I do remember that feeling and thinking, I'm gonna know her forever. Like we are now connected in this powerful way because we were honest with each other. We were very real. And I think it is so hard to do that.
It is.
I experienced that with my sister and a few other friends, but when I was going through it, and I felt so much shame. And I think that's the piece that's really key, at least for me, was the shame around it. And having someone say, you're okay.
It's okay. And I am here.
And this is a very real thing you're going through, and it's not your fault.
Right, that.
I needed to know it wasn't my fault.
Me too, given permission that you will make it through this. I even think you said something to that effect of, it won't always feel like this. And hearing that and knowing, it was like I exhaled for the first time in 6 months.
Because who can you say that to? Who can you admit this to? It doesn't feel like there's a safe place to admit these feelings.
100%, and that's what I hope we can do with this film and with these conversations that we're having, is give women permission to know there's an end to it. And not only that, for those women who are out there thinking, gosh, do I even want to have kids? Do I even want to go down that road? If you don't, that's okay, right?
Absolutely,
if you do, and you're only holding back because you're afraid of not being strong enough, of staying in the dark, of having a pre-existing condition of depression and anxiety, which I certainly have had bouts of that throughout my life, but I'm also a very upbeat person. I'm also a very ambitious person. I think it's really important for women to hear that it doesn't last. It does eventually lift.
It does, and to understand, and I think this is where the art comes in for us, but to understand that through that darkness, through that difficulty, there is so much joy and beauty on the other side of it.
Yeah.
It puts anytime we go through suffering, anytime we go through hardship, it creates strength and grit that will carry you through life.
Yeah.
And that's how I look at the birth process, really. No matter how you gave birth, whether it was naturally, whether it was through C-section, the entire experience of labor is a good picture for this, because you are going through the contractions, you are going through this physical period where you think, I don't even know if I can do this. I remember that.
Me
thinking,
too.
oh my goodness, the transitional period, that is the hardest thing I've ever been through in my life.
Likewise.
Out of that comes this child, right? For us, those of us who are going through postpartum and depression, that child comes out, you think, oh my goodness, I just went through all of that and now I don't feel the way I thought I was supposed to. Are you kidding me right now?
Right. Now
So
what?
now what?
Yeah.
Now, and then you go into this other period of darkness.
Right.
It does lift, and through that challenge, through that hardship and suffering, blooms and blossoms something extraordinary.
Which is how you fell in love with what you do.
Which is how I fell in love with that. And whether you're a person who's creative or not, whether you have other things and other gifts and beauty that you bring into this world, what you experience in this time of darkness, it will emerge into something of beauty. That's the same thing that
Every
happens
time.
when a seed goes into the soil and it goes into its period of darkness. It will shoot forth the blossom, the plant, the beauty, right?
Right.
And so
The fruit.
and we grow out of that.
Yeah.
And it does pass. I remember people saying to me, this too shall pass, and I kind of wanted to slap them. Because I was like,
Also, yes.
you don't know what I'm going through right now.
Yeah.
But it does.
Yeah.
It does.
It does.
And
I kept asking.
Yeah.
I kept how long does this last?
Wait.
How long
Yeah.
will I feel like this? I remember asking that a lot to all the mom friends and all of my family members that had kids. About a year is what I heard, and I remember at like the 3-month mark being like, I'm not doing that. It's not going to take that long. I will make this.
I will power through it.
Right? And
there
I
is no
didn't.
way
You
around
can't.
it.
You have to kind of, and that's the other message, right? Is it does pass, and while you're in it, right? I can't fix it. I can't tell a mom that's deep in postpartum depression right now, all you got to do is go for a run. I mean, do that because you'll feel better.
Sure, you'll get those endorphins, but
it's not going to fix
there's
it.
no magical. There
No.
is no, even if you're taking medication like I did, right? It's still not a magic pill.
Right.
You have to, and that's what I think is so hard. It's already hard, even if you're a mom in postpartum and you're not dealing with depression. The first year is such a challenge.
It's busy, it's loud, it's very, very tired.
There's all these different milestones you go through. You think you have it down, and then that minute, I remember I would say like, oh, she's sleeping through the night now, and that very night she would stop sleeping through the night. I'm like,
Absolutely.
Are you kidding me?
That's another thing. Let's just shout out to moms. Like that first year, nothing is consistent.
Nothing.
You know, they talk about like, oh, just wait until you get in a groove. It doesn't matter.
No, there is no groove.
There is no groove. And
There
you
is no
find
groove.
the groove and it changes, right? So I think that's important for moms to hear as well.
Yeah.
You're not doing it wrong. You didn't jinx it by saying like,
I used to think
she's
I was
sleeping.
jinxing
Me
it
too.
every time. I was like, shut up, Ryan,
I
don't say
shouldn't
it, don't
have
say
said that.
it.
It's the yips. It's like the parenthood yips.
Yeah.
It's not that.
No.
It's just the phase is long and patience is necessary. So,
And you don't need to be okay.
yeah, it's okay. not
You
to be
can
okay.
bawl your eyes out. You can feel like you need to go sit and lock the bathroom door for 5
Correct.
minutes so that you can pull yourself together. And it's important to find the things that can help you through it, whether it's your community, it's things that you do for yourself.
Right.
But I definitely think there's so much strength in finding people who can support you.
And give
and that
you
you
a
can call
lifeline.
when you're saying,
I'm
I'm really struggling today.
Right.
I'm not okay
doing
today.
Okay. Yeah, I need a minute. The other thing, and I struggled setting my baby down in a safe place and walking away. That was really hard for me. It felt like I was maybe neglecting when really it is perfectly okay if your baby has been crying for 3 hours. To lay your baby down in their crib or their bassinet or somewhere
little
safe
bouncy thing.
and
strap 'em in.
take a minute and go to the restroom by yourself
Yep.
or go in a quiet room.
Drink a glass of water.
Right. And have a snack.
And
Eat
have
a snack.
Eat something and then come back, because eating
Absolutely.
something will actually kind of make a huge difference.
Oh my gosh, always. and that's, you know, we talked about it earlier. I don't remember if it was on film or not, but those sometimes powering through looks like taking a shower,
Yes.
or going to the bathroom by yourself, or
Yes.
eating a snack. And it doesn't feel like a lot in that moment, but baby steps. Do as much as you can to fulfill
Yeah.
your needs. And we'll get
Yeah.
into this perhaps at another time, but I will say also the idea of self-care, right? We hear self-care as moms, and it kind of makes us roll our eyes.
Oh, totally. We're like, yeah, right.
I know. I'm like, what does that even mean at this point?
Right.
Self-care is a real thing and needs to be. We need to learn in the prenatal phase how to take care of ourselves just as fervently as we learn how to take care of our babies. And I think that's a missing link in all of this. So I want to thank you for talking to me and for
Thanks for hearing me.
going public. Yeah, and being able to share this. I love you so much.
I love you too.
You were a lifeline for me then, and you are now. So thank you.
Thank you.